The conference room lights were too bright. Always were. Fluorescence overhead. Filtered sunlight bleeding in from the south-facing windows. 3 water bottles placed equidistant on the polished wood table. One in front of David. One for the VP of Operations. One for the head of talent. None in front of me. That was fine. I wasn't listed on the agenda. I never was. Just the one who made the agenda, booked the room, coordinated the slides, preloaded the deck, and ensured the coffee order wasn't late. I took my usual spot, off to the side, laptop closed, pen and notepad in front of me. Neutral, invisible. David sat at the head of the table, hands clasped, posture perfect. He was wearing the suit I helped him pick out for his interview 4 years ago. Navy, tailored, slight shoulder pad to offset the forward lean he did when trying to look like he cared. "Thank you all for making time," he said. "I want to walk you through an initiative I've been shaping over the last quarter, something that's shown early results across our onboarding pipeline and vendor accountability metrics." I didn't move. Slide 1 clicked open. Strategic Integration for Scalable Team Structures. That was the headline I wrote at 11:47 p.m., the night before the draft deadline. He hadn't changed the font. Slide 2. Onboarding bottlenecks, attrition figures, misalignment map. All color-coded exactly the way I laid them out. Slide 3. Procedural correction grid, aligned with a new vendor accountability rubric. He didn't change a word. He skipped Slide 4's intro entirely, just nodded toward the framework and said, "I think the results speak for themselves." They did, because they were mine. The strategic framework David was presenting had taken 6 weeks of pre-dawn research, 3 side-channel interviews with departments he couldn't quite get to, and a system audit I did myself on a weekend while he was in Palm Springs, taking a break from the grind. Every talking point, every visual, every insight, mine. He didn't look in my direction once. By Slide 6, the VP of Operations was nodding. By Slide 7, the head of talent chimed in. "This is some of the most thorough cross-department modeling we've seen this year." David smiled, modest and smooth. "I appreciate that. I've been fine-tuning it quietly over the last couple of quarters." No one corrected him. No one turned to me. After the meeting, as people filed out, David leaned over and whispered with a half-smile, "Nice assist, Elaine. You always know how to make a room run smoothly." I nodded. Nothing more. By the time he was halfway down the hallway, I had already opened my laptop. I pulled up the meeting calendar I managed. Every executive committee slot, draft submission, voting session. I located the final promotion discussion slot. Board subcommittee review. David McAllister. Promotion consideration, 3 required members. 1 vote. Scheduled for next Friday at 10:30 a.m. I canceled the room booking. Then I deleted the meeting. Not rescheduled. Not moved. Just erased. No one would get a reminder. No one would show up. And no one would notice. Because I was the only one who ever watched those meetings run on time. I moved on to the drive folders next. The presentation file he used still bore my internal version ID. Onboarding Strategy version 8, ELR, my initials. My audit dates embedded in the notes section. I downloaded the full history, exported a time-stamped PDF of the original, and archived it to an external cloud drive with a clean, encrypted file name. Then I opened the HR compliance matrix and checked a small but often overlooked policy note. Promotion recommendations require recorded quorum participation from no fewer than 3 voting members. That was the rule, and no one was coming to the meeting. My name is Elaine Rivera. I'm the executive assistant to a man who built his entire upward trajectory on my work. He thinks I organize his meetings, polish his language, and correct his mistakes because I don't know better. He's wrong. I know the system better than anyone in this building. And today, he reminded me why it's time I start using it. I joined Stratwell Partners 5 years ago. It wasn't my first choice, not by a long shot. I'd applied to 3 other firms with sleeker reputations and better benefits. But Stratwell was the only one that called back. Not because of my resume, not because of my references, because their office manager had gone on emergency leave, and they needed someone who could start Monday. I started Friday. The original job title was Temporary Admin Support, but by the end of week 1, I was running the calendar for 4 directors, triaging client communication, and rewriting vendor language that legal said was too soft. No one asked me to. I just saw the gaps, and I filled them. That became the pattern. It's easy to underestimate someone who handles logistics. Most people don't realize the person scheduling their meetings also sees which ones they cancel, who they stall, and how many drafts they send before they sound like they know what they're talking about. They don't think of assistants as architects, but if you spend enough time in the background, you start to see the whole machine. David McAllister joined Stratwell a year after me. Mid-level project manager, decent credentials, no standout work. But he was loud in the right meetings and quiet in the right emails. Executives loved his ownership mindset. It sounded better than what it actually was, delegating everything downward and claiming the product on delivery. I learned fast. David didn't build things. He assembled things, usually from other people's parts. He started asking me to look over decks for client calls, then tighten up case studies, then just drop in a few numbers from the latest quarterly reports. By year 2, I was ghostwriting his department updates. By year 3, I was rewriting his entire strategic review for the VP while pretending not to be in the room when he presented it. And I didn't complain, not once, because I thought it would balance out. I thought, maybe not right away, but eventually, he'd say something, give credit, pass it upward, share the momentum. He didn't. Instead, he got promoted. Twice. And each time, my workload got heavier, not lighter. Because I knew more. And once people know you'll stay late to clean up their thinking, they don't get better. They get dependent. I didn't mind being behind the curtain, but I started to mind the way I was spoken to. One intern once asked me, "Do you want to do this forever? Just supporting? Just supporting." As if support was small, as if keeping the company's projects from collapsing was some sort of accidental hobby. No one ever asked how the reports got formatted, how the budgets got balanced, how the investor summaries were always pre-proofed before legal laid eyes on them. They just assumed the system worked. And I was the system. David knew that. At least, he used to, until he started treating me like I'd never been there at all. The first sign came in the form of a subject line. Team input, updated strategy, doc, Q4 draft. I wasn't on the thread. I wasn't copied. I wasn't blind copied. I only saw it because one of the junior analysts forwarded it to me by mistake, asking, "Hey, did you already send this version to David? It looks like yours." It was mine. The structure, the phrasing, the reference to our new vendor's onboarding lag time, my line, my data, my formatting. The only difference was the file name. Q4 strategy, David M. approved point PPTX. I didn't reply. I just saved a copy, then deleted the forwarded message. That week, my access to the strategic planning folder on the internal drive was downgraded. Read only. No announcement, no explanation. Just a quiet permission shift that stripped me of edit rights to the very materials I had built. I brought it up, softly. I framed it as a tech issue. David smiled, said something about IT trying to consolidate permissions, and told me not to worry. We've got newer folks coming in to help with formatting and polish, so you won't have to carry that burden much longer. That was the moment I knew. They weren't consolidating access. They were erasing the record of where the work came from. A week later, I noticed a new name added to our strategic draft folder. Chloe Walsh, strategy support intern. I'd met her once. Bright, fresh graduate, polite. She was the kind of hire David loved. Clean resume, corporate polish, and no idea how to look behind the curtain. Chloe began uploading versions of the same slides I had authored, slightly tweaked, rearranged. But the bones were identical. The data untouched. Just a fresh font, a new logo position, a different file name. The attribution now read, Team Revision, D. McAllister, C. Walsh. Not even a footnote for me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't schedule a meeting. I just watched. Then the calendar started shifting. I was still managing his executive bookings, but now I was receiving pre-cleared blocks from his new coordinator, Chloe. She wasn't just a ghostwriter. She was a replacement, one with plausible deniability. David still dropped notes on my desk like nothing had changed. Can you update the board prep for Thursday? Make sure the client briefing is printed and paginated. Double-check the hotel address. Don't want to end up in the wrong city again, huh? But something had shifted in the tone. There was no pretense of partnership now. Just assumption. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a resource, one they were preparing to retire. They didn't fire me. They didn't demote me. They just started building a world where I was no longer required. What they didn't realize, what David never understood, was that I never needed the title to own the system. I had already built it, and I still controlled the one thing they all forgot to protect: the flow, the emails, the meeting invites, the agendas, the final step before the decision got made. And now I had a decision of my own to make. I didn't retaliate, I reorganized. The first thing I did was pull the logs. Not from his computer. From mine. Every board draft, every strategic memo, every editable document I had ever created with my initials in the version history, I downloaded, time-stamped, and stored in a clean directory off the network. I didn't change them. I didn't alter a word. I just preserved them. The record wasn't for them. It was for me. The second thing I did was audit the promotion protocol. At Stratwell, director-level promotions weren't a simple performance review. They required a 3-person executive subcommittee to meet, hear the final pitch, and cast a private vote. The vote wasn't binding, but it was necessary. Without it, the HR paperwork stalled. It's a minor step most people overlook. But I don't overlook things. I schedule them. I checked the calendar. Promotion review, D. McAllister. Set for Friday, 10:30 a.m. Room 4, C. 3 invitees, all confirmed. I canceled the room reservation. Then I moved one of the execs into a client hold I invented. I gave another a false overlap with a budget meeting that didn't exist. I didn't remove the meeting entirely. That would leave a trace. I just disconnected it from their attention. By the time Friday came, the promotion review would exist only as a phantom appointment in one man's calendar. David would show up to an empty room. I didn't stop there. I went through the shared folders and noted which documents Chloe was updating. Her versions were clean, presentable, but she didn't understand what the data meant. She'd made 3 logic errors in the ROI calculator alone. David didn't notice. I did. And I didn't fix them. I let those errors pass through to the draft David forwarded to the board. In parallel, I updated the senior partner's executive assistant on a new travel conflict. Fabricated, of course. Her boss, unknowingly, would now be 37,000 feet in the air when David needed his signature. 3 decisions, 3 silent edits, all within scope of my normal duties. No confrontation, no deleted accounts, no threats, just removal. 1 line from an agenda, 1 person from a room, 1 signature from a file. And David? He never even looked up. He still asked me to book his dry cleaning, confirm his Uber, email his thank you note to the board from last quarter. He thought I was the same assistant, keeping his calendar balanced, quietly supporting. But the system he depended on, the scaffolding he climbed, was already shifting beneath his feet, and he wouldn't feel it until he reached for something that wasn't there. The morning of the vote, David came in early. He was wearing his promotion suit, the charcoal one with the notched lapel. He made a show of loosening the cuffs and straightening the collar near my desk. He even winked. "Big day," he said. I nodded and returned to my screen. Nothing in my expression gave anything away. That's the difference between being invisible and being unreadable. I'd long since mastered both. He spent the next hour in his office, rehearsing what I already knew was my script. The slides had been updated slightly, Chloe's formatting, a few swapped icons, but the substance hadn't changed. It was the same vision I had constructed. David just cut out the part where it wasn't his. At 10:22 a.m., he stood in the hallway outside conference room 4C, triple-checking the setup on his tablet. By 10:34, no one else had arrived. I watched him glance at his watch, then his phone. By 10:42, he had that look people get when they've run out of ways to look busy. He stepped out, past my desk, and asked, "Did the meeting get moved?" I didn't look up. "Not that I've seen." He frowned. "We confirmed last week. You sent the invite." I tilted my head. "I don't manage board invites anymore. That's been Chloe's task since the org realignment, remember?" He paused. I could see the calculations forming behind his eyes, then short-circuiting. He didn't know whether to escalate or retreat. So he said nothing and walked back into his office. I already knew what he'd find. 1 board member was on a plane. Another was double-booked with a rescheduled compliance audit. The third? She had simply never received the final confirmation. No quorum, no vote, no promotion. I watched him pace behind the glass wall, then sit, then scroll, then pace again. Chloe knocked once, but he waved her away. At 11:07 a.m., he called HR. At 11:12, he ended the call with a tight mechanical, "Understood." That afternoon, a quiet memo landed in the all-staff inbox. Promotion reviews requiring executive vote will be rescheduled on a rolling basis next quarter. No names, no reasons. Just a line of corporate text that could have meant anything. But I knew what it meant. It meant the system had collapsed on time, right on schedule. Not because I tore it down, because I pulled my hands off the foundation and let gravity do the rest. David didn't say a word to me for 2 days. Then, on Thursday, he stopped at my desk with a rehearsed calm. "Looks like some wires got crossed," he said. "We'll get another session on the books." I didn't look up from my screen. "Sure," I said. He smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. He knew something had gone wrong. He just didn't know how many pieces I had moved. Quietly, professionally, and without ever leaving my desk. And now? He was trying to reschedule a meeting that no one was in a rush to rebook. It took less than 2 weeks for the silence to grow teeth. David stopped mentioning the promotion, stopped mentioning Chloe, stopped forwarding board decks with confident subject lines like "final" or "for approval." His tone changed from when to if, from next quarter to whenever they're ready. I watched him walk past my desk every morning with that same clipped half nod. He was still wearing the charcoal suit on Mondays, still polishing his talking points like the vote might suddenly materialize. But it wouldn't. The reschedule never came. I knew because I controlled the calendar he no longer had access to. Not directly. But the new assistant to the senior partner, Jordan, looped me in every time the execs asked, "What's the story with David?" Jordan was polite, smart, curious, the kind who asks the right questions instead of pretending to know the answers. He'd worked in scheduling before. He understood where real power lives. So when he asked quietly, over coffee in the kitchen, "Did you see something we didn't?" I gave him the answer I knew he would respect. I saw everything. He didn't press. He didn't need to. A week later, I was invited, without explanation, to sit in on a closed-door prep session for an upcoming operational audit. It wasn't my department, but no one batted an eye. 2 days after that, the head of operations sent me a meeting request. Internal workflow brief. Input requested. Elaine R. It was the first time in 5 years my name appeared in the subject line of a strategic document. I accepted. David noticed. I saw it in the way his eyes tracked me, leaving a conference room he wasn't invited to. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. By the end of the month, his name was no longer on the board materials. No one announced it. No memo went out. He simply stopped being the point of contact. Slowly, systematically, like a tab being closed in the background. 2 weeks later, he was repositioned. That was the term used in the internal directory. David McAllister, formerly Director of Project Strategy, was now listed as Advisor, Internal Communications, Transition Role. It sounded polite, harmless, temporary, but it meant exile, no clients, no boardroom, no voting power. The same week, Jordan dropped a folder on my desk. No label, just a stapled cover page. Inside was the full proposal David had presented to the board. My proposal, my structure, my metrics. At the back was a short note in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Not sure who built this, but we'd like you to lead the next version." There was no offer letter, no title change, no announcement. But I didn't need those. Because now, the people who mattered, understood who kept things from falling apart. I never updated my title. Not in the email signature, not on LinkedIn, not in the building directory, which still listed me as Executive Assistant, Office of Strategy. It was accurate enough. I still booked rooms, still checked coffee orders for client meetings, still reminded people, gently, when they were about to step into a room unprepared. But they no longer ignored the reminder. They asked for it. Not because I demanded respect, because they finally understood the cost of operating without it. David left 3 months later. No farewell party, no Slack message, just a system alert. D. McAllister, access removed. I didn't smile. I just closed the notification and returned to what I was doing, reviewing the final line items in a rollout plan for a new internal ops dashboard. One that I had scoped, written, and presented in draft form to the senior partners 2 weeks before. They'd accepted it unanimously. I hadn't pitched it. I hadn't even spoken during the meeting. Jordan had delivered it with a single sentence. Elaine structured the logic. I just cleaned up the visuals. That was all. No applause, no campaign, no elevator banner. But when the dashboard launched, my name was embedded at the bottom of the version history. Quietly, permanently. Authorship by presence, not by volume. One morning, a new hire asked me, politely, what I actually do here. I looked at her, considered the question, and said, I make sure nothing breaks. She smiled, uncertain if that was a joke. I didn't explain. Because there's a kind of power that doesn't need translation. The kind that doesn't show up in org charts or performance reviews. The kind that only becomes visible when it's withdrawn, and suddenly, everything stops working. I don't need a bigger desk. I don't need a title change, but I've stopped calling myself just anything. My name is Elaine Rivera, and if the room is still standing, chances are I built the structure while they were busy looking at someone else.